I'm ready. I'm pumped.
Okay, welcome everyone. Before we get started, you're welcome to pop into the chat where you're calling in from. We're going to give a few minutes for everyone to arrive. Perfect. We've got a large audience today. I think we have about 1,700 folks showing up, taking about an hour out of their time on a busy Thursday to spend time learning about deep sleep. Oh, welcome Wales, welcome Chicago, Austria, Germany. Fantastic. We've got some Muse in the house. Hi, Arvind. Amazing. While everyone's trickling in, grab a cup of tea. You're in for a treat. We've got such an amazing panel today going in for a bit of deep dive on deep sleep and our new features of Deep Sleep Boost. So we'll wait one more minute for everyone to arrive, so get comfy.
What an international crowd here. It's so
I know,
cool.
isn't it great?
Yeah.
I think we have some
Australia,
AIs there too.
Canada, Saudi Arabia. Fantastic. Okay, I think we'll get started. So, welcome. This webinar is all about the benefits of deep sleep and why quantity isn't the same as quality. For those of you who are new to Muse, welcome. You are in for a great hour. This is all about the latest insights into deep sleep. And we've got an absolute rock star lineup from our research team. This is such a rare event to have everyone together, and we're really excited to present this information to you. You're going to get an inside look on how Muse is redefining sleep tracking and intervention, as well as I mentioned, a deep dive into the science behind our latest features, Deep Sleep Boost, and a preview of our Smart Wakeup, a new feature that's launching soon. At the end, we'll save some time for some Q&A. So you've got a Q&A box in your chat. You're welcome to post any questions you have in there, and we'll do our best to get to them at the last 15 minutes of the segment. So, quick thing about Muse, we've been building really accessible, wearable brain sensing technology since 2014. So we've been around for a while. Trusted by over 500,000 users to date and used in more than 200 research studies with institutions like Harvard, Mayo Clinic, and NASA. We added EEG sleep-based tracking in 2019 with our first generation of Muse S. And we've been refining it ever since into what is now the Muse S Athena that we're very proud of. And it is now the most accurate sleep wearable on the market with an 88 to 96% sleep detection rate, outperforming ring and wrist wearables. What has always set Muse apart, though, isn't that we just track sleep, is that we're actively improving it, and that's what we're going to dive into today. So I couldn't be more proud, honestly, to introduce this a fantastic panel. So we have Chris Aimone, our co-founder and chief innovation officer. We have Maurice Abou Jaoude. He is here as our senior research scientist, and our bioresearcher, David Baum. Welcome all. So we're going to dive right in. So David, we'll start with you. I want to just talk about, back up. What is deep sleep and why that really matters? So I'll give the floor over to you.
Thank you. So you said 1,700 people, so I'm quite pumped. I have never been personally part of the webinar this big, so thank you all for joining. Pumped is actually a good keyword, I guess. We will get to that. But yeah, let's answer the question, why deep sleep and why deep sleep boost? So this is kind of your set of obligatory introduction slides. It's only a handful, but it really sets the basis to understand why we are going this road. And it's because sleep is important. Sleep is so important actually that it's universal. It is known, or it's a characteristic of all known animal species in the world. And even the ones that are not following our classic sleep pattern, they came up with some fancy tricks and they still sleep. It is just that important. And it probably comes to no surprise to anybody that it's important, but it's important sometimes to remind ourselves why. And it's because it's it's a driver. It's one of the main drivers of overall health, because it's involved in just basic functions such as immune function, mood regulation, and cognitive performance. And nowadays, sleep deprivation, on the other hand, affects 1 out of 3 people, and especially in the US and Canada. And in short term, it reduces performance, and in long term, it leads to serious health issues. But sleep is not only you going to take a rest and then your brain shuts off and you wake up after a couple of hours. It's actually quite an organized process. It's highly organized because your sleep is segmented into different periods that we call sleep stages. So you have this diagram here, the pie chart that shows N1, N2, N3, and REM. So those are the classic, this is the classic terminology, but just it stands for light sleep, deep sleep, and REM sleep. And you see that there is a certain proportion of each of those sleep stages. And this is because they are somewhat respected between the nights. They might vary from night to night, of course, based on your individual situation, but it's just to show that it's a highly organized process. And if you lay it out in time, so in this case, we are looking at what we call a hypnogram, right? You see that once you go into a sleep stage, once your brain goes into a sleep stage, it stays there for minutes or maybe even up to an hour before switching to something else, to another stage. So it is an important organized process. And this comes to no surprise because each sleep stage has its involvement in several physiological functions. REM sleep is your emotional regulation. This is where you dream, you experience your dreams. Then you have light sleep, which is neural plasticity. And then, of course, deep sleep, which is involved in physical and molecular repair and metabolic clearance. And we will get to that particular point. So yeah, during that talk, we focus on deep sleep, of course. So if we look at deep sleep, by the way, during deep sleep, you're deeply unconscious, but your brain is definitely not sleeping. It's still not sleeping at that moment. And if we look at deep sleep from a brain activity perspective, as the Muse is recording brain signals, for example, where you look on the graph on the right and you see that comparing all the different sleep and vigilance stages that you might be in, what seems to us, like to the human eye at least, to be somewhat random activity, you see in contrast during deep sleep, you have this really almost steady up and down motion, right, of the brain activity. It's an up-down swing of what we call large fluctuations. So here you have an example of what that fluctuation or what the brain signal in a classic Muse recording looks like. And you see those moments where you have this up and down swing. And those are the slow waves. Those events are called slow waves. Sometimes they are referred to as delta waves and slow oscillations, and they oscillate between up and down every second or so. And if there's a researcher on this call, by the way, I want to point this out, and just spilled the tea or water over the keyboard because I treat slow waves, delta waves, and slow oscillations as synonym. Of course, there's way more to it. We need to be careful how to mix and match those terms. But for the sake of that seminar, it's fine. So slow waves are swinging, a swinging activity between inactive and active state. So the neurons go into a hyperpolarized state and then depolarize. And it's a large wave because there's a large number of neurons in the cortex that is contributing to that up and down motion right at the same time. They're in synchrony. That's what we call cortical synchrony. And that is what is driving what we call a mechanic waste pump, right? So you see that in the animation. It's literally your brain pushing out mechanically the waste material that accumulates between the cells throughout the day. So slow waves are driving that waste pump, and it's because they swing between up and down. And I just want to highlight that word because the swing is an analogy I get to all of the time throughout this talk, maybe even to the point where it's starting to get annoying, but it's really the main principle that we work here with. So deep sleep, that is why deep sleep matters. Deep sleep has a mechanic waste pump. It's quite literally your brain taking out the trash. And that's why we refer to deep sleep as being the regenerated sleep. So deep sleep, if you look at deep sleep from a brain perspective again, and the temporal organization, we have seen that, right? It's the steady up and down movement, and we call those trains of slow waves. So that's like the subsequent events of subsequent slow wave events that line up. But your brain is not always in hypersynchrony throughout deep sleep. Your brain might also sometimes lose that synchrony, that rhythmicity, and go into a pattern that we internally at least call here stop-start motion, where your brain tries to get into synchronous mode, doesn't get quite into it, and comes out of it, etc. It's not a bad sign in itself. It's just that your brain loses that rhythmicity sometimes. So the time that you spend in deep sleep, the length of your sleep is not equal necessarily to the deep sleep efficacy. So we need to distinguish between both. So that is why deep sleep matters, and that's why we bring Deep Sleep Boost to you. We want to enhance that slow wave swinging to boost deep sleep efficacy. So we take that natural process of up and down swinging and just push that swing at the right time to keep it going. That's the main proposal here. And by
David,
the way,
can I just pause there for a second? Just go back to that slide. I just want to reemphasize how great it is that and difficult it is to really understand when to push that swing at the right time. And I know that that's something that the team has been working on for quite some time. So pausing there just to say that, it is something that's really important in terms of accuracy, in terms of, in all the research that we've done, to really know when to again push that swing.
For sure. I mean, your brain is working hard, but it's not that the brain is somewhat awake and says, "Hey, do whatever you want to me. I'm still resting at some point, so be careful when you do stuff to me." For sure. And then lastly, maybe also to answer that question, why deep sleep boost? Amongst all the sleep habits that, or the sleep hygiene or the habits that people come up with, there are a lot of people that use digital tools actually, such as sleep apps, to at least monitor their sleep to understand what is going on, and potentially try to enhance or improve their sleep overall. So we feel in a good position because we provide those digital tools. And I think there's a section reserved for that, and Maurice can give way more details how we use those tools.
Yeah, fantastic. That's a great segue. Maybe Maurice, the next section of this presentation is really, how does Muse measure at home? What makes us different from, say, rings and watches in terms of sleep tracking and sleep intervention?
Great question. Sorry. Before I answer that, let's maybe take a look at how sleep is analyzed actually in a clinical setting. So basically, if you're having sleep problems and you want to get checked clinically, what you typically do is that you have to go to a sleep lab to do what's called a polysomnography or a PSG. So what happens is that you get hooked up to a bunch of different sensors that measure your breathing, but most importantly, we want to measure your brain activity through something called an EEG or electroencephalography. So these are the sensors that you see here in that picture, that you see here on the forehead. So these sensors are very critical because ultimately the main reason we sleep is because our brain needs to sleep. It needs it. It needs the rest. It needs the restoration. So actually the best way to understand how you're sleeping is by looking directly at your brain. So yeah, so you sleep in a clinic overnight and you have your brain waves recorded overnight. And then the next day, a sleep tech is going to look at the recording of your brain activity throughout the entire night and then assign a specific sleep stage to every 32nd of the night. That's the hypnogram that David talked about earlier. And they do this by looking at the brain waves and identifying landmarks in your brain waves that are specific to every sleep stage and following a strict set of rules. For example, in N2 or light sleep, you're going to see bursts of activities called sleep spindles or sharp spike called K complexes. In N3, as David was talking about, you're going to see these large rolling, these swinging slow waves. And in REM, rapid eye movements. So as the name suggests, you're going to see rapid eye movements in the EOG. in the electrooculogram. So all these stages, as also David alluded to, all these stages are vital to you. Each one has its own function. And 2 helps with processing motor skills and transitioning you deeper into deep sleep. And 3 is your physical restoration phase, where your brain clears out toxins, as David explained. And REM is crucial for emotional regulation and consolidating complex memories. So they're going to map out your nights. And once you have your night mapped out, then you can assess someone's sleep quality by looking at the amount of these different sleep stages, how much you got light sleep, how much you got deep sleep, how much you got REM sleep. But also we look at how you transitioned between those sleep stages. So you look at the hypnogram. And we also look importantly about how fragmented and interrupted is your sleep. But I don't know if you just noticed or realized this entire process is it's time consuming, is expensive, is labor intensive. You need to go to the sleep lab. And honestly, like if you look at this picture, does this really even reflect how naturally you sleep when you have all these wires glued to your face and body? So what we sought to do with Muse is to bring this exact process into the comfort of your home. So the Muse actually has EEG sensors that can read your brain activity, similar to what you would get in a sleep lab. I don't know if you can show the picture here, David, but yes. So we took what happens in the lab to your home. And Muse measures your brainwave, the exact same brainwave that you measure in the lab. And we have built AI algorithms that can read that brain activity and it has learned how to stage your sleep just like a human expert does. So the same process. And actually, our AI algorithm is just as accurate as a human sleep expert looking manually at your data in the lab. And this was externally validated by researchers at the Canadian Sleep Consortium. So they ran a study where they had 47 people where clinical PSG, so they went to the sleep lab, they had their custom PSG, and they also wear the Muse headband at the same time. And then they compared the sleep stages that were scored by human experts against the automatic outputs of our Muse AI. And the result was that both sleep stages, so both hypnograms, they matched with the score of 0.76 kappa. So in the sleep science world, we use this metric called Cohen's kappa to measure how much 2 experts agree with each other or how much an expert agree with an AI. And so it's basically a way to measure accuracy that rules out lucky guesses. So just to put that 0.76 into perspective, if you give the exact same sleep data to 2 different human sleep techs, they won't perfectly agree. In fact, 2 humans will agree with each other with a score of around 0.75. This is all to say that Muse's AI agrees with human experts just as well as 2 human experts agree with each other. And if you break this down into specific sleep stages, and you lump N1 and N2 into the light sleep stage, our specific accuracies, they range between 88 and 96% across wake, light, deep, and REM sleep. So pretty accurate. And this is all made possible because the Muse AI has access to this exact same brain activity that is clinically used to look at sleep. As you can see here in these slides, in these side-by-side images of EEG coming from the clinical PSG, that's the top the top traces, and the EEG coming from the Muse headband, that's the bottom traces. They are recording at the exact same time, and you can see the same kind of brain activity. So now you might be asking, like, how are those other, like our wrists and these finger-worn devices, how are you able to give sleep stages if they don't have access to the brainwaves? Well, to understand that, and sorry, this is answer taking too long, sir. I know you have the simple.
No, you're good.
Yeah.
You're good. I am
I
gonna
know.
pause. Can I
Yeah.
pause for one moment? I do see
Yeah,
quite a
sure.
few. I see quite a few researchers in our crowd here. So what I did want to point out as we're sort of moving out of the research phase is that Muse does have quite a few research tools because now we're essentially an at-home sleep lab. Summer, Martin, you can pop in the chat just research partners at choosemuse.com. You can definitely get in touch with us for how to use Muse in the professional practices in sleep research. It's something that we've made very accessible because of this work. So I wanted to point that out there. But please, Maurice, yes, continue.
Thank you, Sarah. That's a very good point you made. We do have a lot of tools to enable researchers to use this for their sleep studies. So back to the wrist and finger worn devices. So to understand how they stage sleep, you have to understand that sleep doesn't just induce changes in your brain, but also it introduces changes in your entire body. For example, you go to sleep, you're wide awake, and then as you enter light sleep, your heart rate is going to slow down, your body temperature is going to drop, and your muscles are going to relax. In deep sleep, your blood pressure falls and your heart rate goes even lower. In fact, in deep sleep, your heart rate reaches its lowest point. In REM sleep, your brain becomes a bit more active because you're dreaming, which causes your heart rate and your heart rate variability to become a bit erratic. But in this stage, your muscles, they actually switch off because you don't want to act out your dreams. So in all, what we can understand is that by looking at heart rate and movement and temperature, you can kind of guess which sleep stage you're in. And this is what basically wrist and finger worn devices mainly do. They have sensors. They're technically called photoplethysmography and accelerometry. And these sensors, they can measure your heart rate and your activity levels. And by the way, the Muse also have advanced versions of these exact same sensors. So by looking at heart rate and movement, you can kind of estimate using machine learning to a certain extent which phase of sleep you're in. However, heart rate and movements, they are just proxies of your sleep. So you could be lying down perfectly still in your bed with a very low heart rate and still be wide awake. So it's really only looking at your brain, at the source, is that you can definitely know exactly where you are. And this is especially true for deep sleep. Like all sleep stages, true deep sleep is defined by what happens in the brain. In fact, for a 30-second window of EEG to be officially classified as deep sleep, it has to meet strict criteria. Can you go to the next slide, David? I can see the criteria. Yes, so the criteria. So the brain waves must be very slow. So this is exactly the same thing that David was talking about earlier. They have to be very slow. They must be large in amplitude. So they should be over 75 microvolts in amplitude. And these slow waves, they have to make up at least 20% of that 30-second window in order for a 30-second window to be called deep sleep. Or else you're in light sleep. And so now you might ask, like, why the specific criteria? Why is it even 30 seconds? It actually goes back to when sleep was still recorded on a physical paper. In fact, some of these rules regarding sleep staging are partially based on the size of that piece of paper. And because the Muse's AI learned how to sleep score by watching and learning from human experts, it might try to follow those same rules. But the catch is that there are some factors, for example, aging, that can cause the amplitude of these brain waves to naturally decrease. So someone might still be getting these slow waves, but because they don't hit that strict 75 microvolt threshold, the traditional 30-second scoring system says that is not deep sleep, and it says that they're getting little or no deep sleep. And in the age of AI, this rigid view of sleep as putting them in 5 discrete boxes is starting to show its limitation. And this is what actually, to solve this problem, this is what you're actually working on at Muse. We're developing more continuous, data-driven measures of your sleep that can look beyond the 5 sleep stages. And these nuanced measures of sleep are what allows us to offer not just better understanding of your sleep, but also to actually develop these active neuromodulation applications like sleep assist and deep sleep boost that we're talking about today to improve your sleep. And I hope that answers your question, Sarah.
No, that's fantastic. And that's a great segue into, this accuracy that we have really lends itself to developing this feature. So I'm going to bounce us back to David. The science behind Deep Sleep Boost. Can you talk about deep sleep stimulation and how this actually works and how we've sort of presented this into the app for our users?
Sure, for sure. Let me just look where the section. There we go. All right, yeah, how Deep Sleep Boost works. So we've seen so far that during deep sleep, the brain is physically recovering, right? Driven by the slow waves pumping activity, by the swinging activity of slow waves. And that their rhythmicity is one of the hallmarks really of deep sleep quality. And this is exactly what we are targeting, slow waves with Deep Sleep Boost. So if we just look at what a slow wave is, we've said it already, right? So you have this down movement and then the upswing. So you have what we call a down phase, and that's your neuron that is dormant, or as well, large numbers of neurons that are dormant at the same time. That's why the signal goes down. And then they all fire up at the same time. They go to what is called an up phase and just fire at the same time, communicating with each other. And there's research talking now about the image on the right. There's research that has shown that if you just give a small sound, just a small burst of, can be a random noise, just at the right time, somewhere around that up phase, you continue that synchrony, the swinging activity of slow waves. So you see that in the line, in the red line, right? So you have those two sound presentations just around the up phase, and you kind of continue, you let it go on. The brain continues that rhythmic slow wave activity. Whereas in the control condition in black, you don't see that because your brain just might have lost that synchrony. So this is really what we are targeting here. We want to present sounds to sustain the rhythmic activity of slow waves, to make deep sleep more efficient. So again, I'm talking, as I was saying, right, I'm always talking about the swing. This is the perfect analogy. And we did that in a fashion that we call listen, align, reinforce. So listen, because of course we need to know what's going on in your brain when we measure brain activity, for example. So we integrate all the different biosignals coming from the Muse band, and then we align because we take that naturally occurring rhythmicity of slow waves, and we want to reinforce that. So we need to align with that rhythmicity, and of course, in the end, to present sound at the right time so that we reinforce that process. But not only that, we also have a big responsibility of protecting your deep sleep. We need to learn when pushing the swing might be too much. When are we pushing the swing too hard? So that an extreme example might be, we might wake up people, for example. A deep sleep, as we have seen, is a regenerative sleep stage, and it has to stay that way. And we need to protect that. So how this works, this is now diving into the research. This is getting a bit researchy, but we are looking at this from a high level. If we take that paradigm, listen, align, and reinforce. Well, I was saying, right, we take those biosignals. So we have brain activity from EEG, the blood flow from PPG, and then also information about movement intensity or the twitching during sleeping from the accelerometer or gyroscope. And we need to align with whatever is going on in your brain. First, we need to know when you are deeply asleep. And then we need to align with the slow wave swinging. So post-recording analysis showed that the algorithm that we have trained is greatly aligned with that slow wave swing activity. So we are super happy about this. This is the polar plot that I'm showing you, right? It's pointing up. So most of the sound presentations that are occurring during that phase, they are occurring somewhere around the up phase of the slow waves. So we are we're pretty pleased with that. But the end objective, of course, is to reinforce that rhythmicity. And this is where we looked into as well, of course. So again, this is a bit researchy, but what we saw is an increase, significant increase in slow waves per train, per slow wave train, but also an increase in the number of occurrences of slow wave trains. So what this translates to is longer duration of the periods where your brain is in synchronous mode, and then also more occurrences of your brain going into that synchrony mode, to more occurrences of that swing going, and then going longer. So in terms of numbers, this translates to an increase of by 24% longer slow wave trains, and an increase of 42% of more slow wave trains. And combining those two metrics, this leads to a whopping almost 80% of more deep sleep rhythmicity. Again, we keep that swing going. So how deep sleep boost works, we make deep sleep more efficient. We do so by pushing the swing just at the right time by sound presentation so that the swing keeps going. And in the end, this is leading to more synchronous brain activity, more efficient waist pumping, for example, so that the deep sleep is more efficient. I would have, by the way, I would have also some slides about how deep sleep boost, since now we know how it's working, how this can work out for end users, but then also for clinicians and researchers if there's a need to go into that.
Yeah, let's look at, so in terms of how Deep Sleep Boost is, very practically working in the app for a person. So I want to use Deep Sleep Boost. How in the app am I engaging this? So when we're talking about giving that push, what's actually happening? What is the stimulation that's happening?
Yeah, so by default we use something that is called pink noise. It's a term. It has a very defined. It's a regulated noise. It's a regulated noise pattern where it follows intensity depending on the frequency of the sound burst. And so it's pink noise, and that's what we use by default because it's well studied, and we are biologically sensitive to that. So it works pretty well, and it's also safe to use for repeated stimulations, right? Because the idea is that you turn Deep Sleep Boost on, and it boosts your deep sleep whenever the algorithm feels that, hey, this is the moment to do so. So we have repeated stimulations, and pink noise is safe for that. But we can also use other things. Relaxing words. I know that some people in our at Muse would be pretty excited about this, to use relaxing words, because those words, quite in the same way, but in different underlying mechanism, but they would enhance your calmness during deep sleep and improve your deep sleep quality by playing those relaxing words, because it activates positive semantic memory of those. So this is for the end users, but let's talk about clinicians or researchers. We implemented Deep Sleep Boost in such a way that it can be super easily adapted, so that we can change the protocols by using the same underlying technology. So we can actually transform this into a protocol of targeted memory reactivation to strengthen or weaken specific memory contents in subjects or patients. Or, quite frankly, bring your own protocol where you can change the parameters to your liking, because you might have a protocol that you have already applied in a lab setting, but for several reasons, one of which is what Maurice has shown, in a lab setting, sleep can be a bit tricky. So bring your own protocol, bring it to the real world, and you can do that with Muse. So yeah, this is why Deep Sleep Boost can benefit both end users and professionals.
Fantastic. I think I'd like to turn over Chris for a moment just to pull back in terms of, I see quite a bit of users, worried about volume levels, how to, is this going to disrupt deep sleep? So maybe just give just a quick overview around, why we've put so many toggles in terms of volume, and do you need earbuds? How this kind of practically works out, and how you've thought about If this is brand new to somebody who really does struggle with deep sleep, some tips for how to get started.
Yeah, we could have a whole webinar just on this.
Yes, we could.
But I think maybe the first thing to know, if you haven't experienced this yet, the sounds that are used are very, very small and short, and it doesn't actually take a lot of intensity for the brain to be able to receive it. So, in terms of the sounds that are used, one of the most important things is that your brain can actually distinguish it from your background. So, there's this particular kind of noise that we're using right now. We're going to introduce others. If you were on a plane, for example, there's a lot of noise in the cabin. You wouldn't be able to distinguish a pink noise from the other ambient noise, for example. So that wouldn't work at all. So being able to distinguish the sound is the most important thing. But as long as that's happening, this boosting effect, we see it happening. And it's really, we believe it's part of how you're getting some sensory orienting towards the sound. So what I'm trying to say is it doesn't have to be a super loud sound, and it's also very, very short in time. And so because we are only presenting this also when you're in your deepest sleep, when you're very unconscious, we find that if we were to randomly stimulate you, you wouldn't get the boosting effect, but it also wouldn't wake you up. So in many ways, it's this sound stimulation in this particular moment in sleep is actually quite safe to do. So that's the first thing. The next thing is that getting this set up for yourself in the right way is really important. So, you want to make sure the sound you're producing is audible. So if you're going to set it up in your bedroom, if you're going to have it come out of your phone speaker, as an example, you need to kind of put your phone where it's going to live during the night, set it up, test the sound, and make sure you can hear it, while you're lying there on your pillow, and to make sure that it's, not going to, scare the cat or something because it's too loud. And then you asked this, question about headphones. So hearing the sound is the most important thing. So you'd think that wearing headphones would be the ideal way to go, and it can be. But it does have an added complication because when you're using a Bluetooth headset, there's an additional, actually quite substantial time delay that happens between when your phone says, "Hey, make a sound," and the sound actually coming out of your headphones. And so this is something that our algorithms account for, but because we're having to predict into the future, it's less accurate than if we don't have that additional hurdle. We're always predicting in the future a little bit, because there's time from the measurement to it actually coming into your device and doing all the analysis. We have to account for that. But when you add Bluetooth headphones on top, it's another hurdle. So, if you're able to use your phone speaker, that's probably the easiest thing to use. If you can use wired headphones, we know that we'll have a better timing performance. So the pushing of the swings happening at the right time. But our algorithms do account for what happens when you're wearing Bluetooth headphones as well. So just if we had our choice, we would go one way because all of these factors add up with the precision of what we're able to do. But yeah, so I think what we found is people who are seriously getting into this, they'll tweak the settings every night until they find something that's comfortable. And if you were to see it waking you up, or waking up your partner, for example, if you're in bed with somebody else. Obviously, you'd pull back a little bit there.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And just to address before we move on to another feature that we're going to announce today, I do see quite a bit of comments in the chat around just general sleep. How do I get better sleep in general? I will get Summer to attach some of our resources that we have as a company, for example, the Power of Sleep, that really addresses how you can use Muse holistically to improve overall stressors that might be affecting your sleep. But Deep Sleep Boost in particular is definitely going to address helping sustain that deep sleep. Is there any other comments around general sleep, getting better sleep that you want to add to this conversation, Chris?
Mhm. Well, I mean, there's a lot of cool things that you can notice as you start measuring your sleep. And something that we're pretty excited about launching. This is a coming soon, and it's a bit of a sneak peek, but Maurice kind of hinted at looking at beyond the 5 stages and sleep depth. This is something that we think is quite important because, again, as David's been stressing, not all deep sleep is equal. So one thing that we do notice is depending on what your day is like and your nighttime going before bed routine is it does have an impact on how your deep sleep looks. and you get most of your deep sleep in the first part of the night. So by having an accurate tracking device to be able to see how that's going, you'll be able to fine tune some of these before bed routines. One thing which is known throughout the sleep community is if you drink before bed, drink alcohol, is pretty bad news for your deep sleep. And it takes time for alcohol to move through the body. So naturally, if your deep sleep's, happening in the beginning of the night, you're not doing yourself any favors there. So I think looking at your sleep characteristics with Muse or Muse-like device is really helpful, as well as when are you waking up? So I think sleep disturbances in the night are something that we all suffer from, and it can be from many things. But if you can notice a pattern in that, like, light in the bedroom, sound, there's many things that can disturb you. And if you get disturbed at the wrong moment, it can be quite hard to get back to sleep again. And so that's something that we've tried to address with our sleep assist feature. But I mean, there's nothing better than just sleeping continuously through the night and to reduce that fragmentation. And other things like trouble breathing, we know that apnea is a big challenge for many people. Again, one of the reasons why that's such a big issue is it does disturb you and it fragments your sleep. So I think these are, some things to look at apart from all of the other big picture stuff. I mean, learning how to calm the mind, meditation really helps. Eating at the right times, getting exercise. I mean, we go on and on about this, but I think you should be thinking holistically. But even if you've kind of taken care of all those little things, when you get into analyzing what's happening with a good sleep tracker, you start to get some insights that you can use to kind of level up a little bit there.
I love this. So, just a quick recap, because this has been a lot of amazing information. We've learned that Muse is incredibly accurate at tracking sleep, particularly all 5 stages and hopefully beyond. We've really talked about Deep Sleep Boost and this new feature for helping people stay in deep sleep longer. And maybe, Chris, do you just want to talk about our Smart Fade technology and what Sleep Assist is? It is already a feature in our app, and maybe just quickly go into that second feature that folks can use if they're having trouble getting to sleep, for example, or are having those circumstances where they're waking up, let's say at 3 in the morning. Just maybe talk about how that works real quick.
Yeah. So Sleep Assist used to be called the digital sleeping pill. It's now changed identity. So just in case you were an earlier user of this tech, it's actually quite a simple concept. If you have children or remember your parents reading to you as you go to sleep, because there's something that's very beautiful that you can do with someone if you get them into a story as you're falling asleep. And that is a story allows us to step into another world and kind of forget, the problems we're having in this moment. So one of the biggest challenges that people have when they're falling asleep is a busy mind. And a busy mind combined with the stresses of the day or the things that are challenging you really is a tough combination. And the thinking mind really doesn't want to let go. Once it's kind of like latched into this thought loop or emotional loop, it tends to, re-energize you and keep you from getting into a real sleep-ready state and falling asleep. So we created this thing, which is basically like a, storyteller that has the intelligence of a parent that can actually watch and see like, hey, how are you doing? Are you ready to fall asleep right now? But to sort of have that be driven by an intelligent machine, like an AI that we have in the app. So basically reads you a story. You can invest in that. And when you start to, detach from that stressor loop that's going on in your mind, this is when you notice that you're tired and you start to have these like micro moments where you're dozing. And if you can see precisely when those moments are happening and you can take away that storytelling experience just at the right time, the brain kind of goes on pause waiting for the story to continue because you're in it. And it's in that moment, if you don't continue, that you sort of fall asleep by accident. And this is what happens to our kids when we read to them. And the same thing can be true, listening to music that really soothes you, or if you're listening to the sounds of nature, if you love thunderstorms or something. I mean, all of these things can be anchors that can kind of take us out of the cycle of our thoughts. And if you can get the timing perfectly right, this gives that sleep opportunity where you fall asleep. And it seems like by accident. It's really just, finding the opportune moment, to kind of like tease the brain and but not give it what it wants, and you're quite tired. So that's the moment where you fall asleep. So timing is critical. And I think, that's one of the beautiful things about EEG is we have this very, very time accurate, nuanced understanding of what's happening in your brain state. It's what allows the sleep assist to work, and it's also what allows this deep sleep boost to work, where giving that swing a push at just the right time is really where the magic happens. It's not that you're making a particular kind of sound, it's you're making a sound at just the right time for the brain and natural oscillation to be reinforced.
Absolutely. And for those of you asking, you can definitely use these two features in tandem. We've got great new videos in the sleep section where you can learn all about Deep Sleep Boost and Sleep Assist and how to work with both of them depending on how you want to customize your sleep journey. And as the guys have said, this is an exploration into improving your sleep. So it does take a little bit of time in terms of, exploring a couple of nights, what works for you in terms of volume, for example, and really noticing what are the patterns of sleep. And speaking of, we have a great new feature coming out. Chris, if you want to start talking about smart alarms and what this is, I'm very excited for this because I'm a big dreamer and I know that being woken up mid-dream is something that really drives me crazy. So would love to hear your explanation of this new feature coming out.
Yeah, yeah, cool. Well, actually, it's a continuation of timing is everything because one of the reasons why we wake up on the wrong side of the bed or feel really groggy in the morning is because we have an alarm that's waking us not at the most opportune moment in our morning sleep cycle. So as David was sort of pointing out earlier in the presentation, we go through like a very, specific cycle through different stages when we're sleeping properly. And there are moments where you are naturally ready to get up. And this typically happens right after we finish dreaming, not during dreaming, right after we finish. And you typically, if you look at your sleep, architecture throughout the night, you'll often see like right after you finish dreaming, you'll have a small micro arousal. You'll actually even see some wake sometimes, and you can wake up then. And so if you can wake someone up at that precise moment, it's like you're already ready to go, right? The part like we have to remember that not the whole brain doesn't sleep together. And so when you wake up, wherever you wake up, there is a latency of all the parts of your brain starting to wake up. So we call that sleep inertia. So if someone were to wake you up from deep sleep, man, it is like getting pulled out of the deep ocean. It's like just a terrible experience. Like, wow, like what, it's just brutal. What's going on? And it takes a long time to recover from that. If you get woken up during your dreams, well, actually, if you do that, you tend to remember what's happening in your dreams, first of all, which actually can be interesting if you're interested in that and stepping into your dreams. But if you wake up, if you look at what happens in the brain right after dream sleep, and in dream sleep, your brain waves actually look like you're awake. And as we were mentioned earlier, your body gets paralyzed so that you're not able to act out your dreams because in some way your brain is functioning like you're awake. You're going through this kind of experience. And so you can imagine your brain after that moment is quite ready to be awake because you've just been having almost a waking-like experience. And if you let the brain go down into a deeper sleep after that and you wake someone up, then again you're in that same problem of having that sleep inertia uh, be in your experience when you wake up. And so that gives us that slowness, right? So waking someone up at that opportune moment is what you want to do. And so smart wake up, some people call this a smart alarm, is looking for those specific moments when you have access to someone's EEG and you can measure their brain waves, then you can get that precise moment just right, which really makes that, easeful wake up the most probable. And it's quite a bit fancier than that. Like if you're gonna say, okay, my alarm is at 9 a.m. and I'm set my smart wake window to be 1 hour, you're looking for that opportune moment in that hour. And the AI in there has to ask a question. It's okay, you're in that smart wake window. Should I wake someone up right now, or are they going to complete their dreaming before the end of the window? Should I wait? And so you have to have this kind of intelligence about how sleep is architected, how a person typically sleeps, so we can learn from their prior patterns to know when that right time is likely going to be, so we can make the right decision. And then once you say like, hey, we should wait, and I'm going to see that moment where we see like the dream ends, and now we can wake them up. So that's kind of what it's looking for. And so this is kind of the basic smart alarm, smart wake scenario. But there's actually a lot of really fun things that you can do also with that besides this simple like, hey, wake me up at just the right time. And this might be, hey, I want to start with a morning affirmation because if you catch the brain at the right time, it's actually a beautiful time to start your day with an idea. So that's like one cool
Love
thing.
that.
The other cool like that thing you can do very easily out of the box is if you're interested in remembering your dreams, you can set this thing to wake you up just at the end of your dream cycle, not just after it. And this is a very simple way if you're someone who's interested in your dreams, but you're not good at remembering them. You can kind of bring your dream world into your consciousness by waking up just before the dream cycle ends. And then there's a twist on that, which I'm personally very excited about, as someone who wakes up in the morning. And if I'd hit snooze, I find that I can enter back in my dreams just a little bit.
Mhm.
And so we kind of had this idea of an auto snooze because one of the problems if you wake up and you have to snooze your alarm, you've actually like really you've had to move, you've opened your eyes, and we know this kind of clears the dream cache. And you tend to either wake up or you forget anyway. So it's not the most ideal things if you're interested in continuing your dreams. So an auto snooze, basically, the moment you start to rouse by the alarm, you immediately tune it out. So you just bump someone as they're waking up, and then you go back into your dreams and you can kind of ride along like that for a while by surfing in that post-dreaming hypnagogic state, which is super interesting. So yeah, I'm personally stoked about the auto snooze feature. But there's some very cool things that you can do with the smart alarm. And so we're excited to have this feature come out so we can start building upon it with some of these different flavors.
This is so great. I'm also very excited for this. So I think we're going to go with a couple of questions just in the chat here. And maybe the first one is really around folks. There's a couple of questions around folks who are doing shift work or don't get that much sleep. And just to reiterate, deep sleep boost works when you hit deep sleep. So they're just a little bit worried that it might not work for them if they're not getting, a long period of sleep. Maybe just address for those people who do work on shift or are getting shorter sleep, can we expect the deep sleep boost might help them?
Yeah. So deep sleep is something that we see the brain creates when it's needed. And it really is if you stay awake for a long period of time. So for example, like let's say you're going through a shift transition and you end up having to run a much longer day, as an example, you see that someone will get much more deep sleep. It'll happen much sooner. So if the brain is in dire need of deep sleep, doing this shift doesn't necessarily, inhibit that. But I think that, I mean, we haven't studied this a lot, but I would expect that you're going to see the benefits as long as you're getting into those deep stages that the deep sleep boost will be able to, try to boost the efficacy of those. And I think, with the shift work example, also the sleep assist is a really interesting thing to explore because I think we're all creatures of habit, and if you can build a really good habit to help put you to sleep in times where you're maybe having trouble because it's not a normal time in your circadian rhythm, because you're doing a shift, then it's very helpful to have a sleep routine that you can kind of like hit the sleep button. And it's partially having the technological solution, but also having a really well built go to sleep habit that the brain can kind of tap into and leverage.
Oh, fantastic. And there's probably three or four lucid dreaming questions in the app. And we don't have time to really dive into this, but I know, Chris, you're probably a great person to ask this to. Does deep sleep boost affect something like lucid dreaming? Or is there any way to get involved, or is there any plans around lucid dreaming in the future with Muse?
Yeah, so we don't expect the deep sleep boost to affect lucid dreaming, but the smart alarm you will be able to use for your own lucid dreaming explorations. There are some very powerful ways that if you pick a particular sound, you use an alarm that's going to, address, your REM cycle specifically. So while you're in REM sleep, then this is a very, I don't want to say easy. Lucid dreaming is a bit of a challenge because you have to, do a bit of homework for it, but you can, learn to recognize the particular sound used. and easier to go down that road than it is to, kind of build the sort of the traditional ways of having like a lucid dreaming instantiation. So you will be able to use the smart alarm for this creative purpose as well if you're interested in lucid dreaming. But it's just quite interesting what you can do if you have a choice of sound with a bit of personal homework. So in the case of the smart alarm, it's a gateway to lucid dreaming. In the case of Deep Sleep Boost, we're going to offer some different sounds because we know that we're finding that people do have preferences as well. If you use a sound in the Deep Sleep Boost that you actually listen to as part of, let's say you're trying to learn another language, so having the memory consolidation of a new vocabulary is important to you. You can actually use a familiar sound, and if you use that for your Deep Sleep Boost, that's been scientifically shown to increase your memory consolidation. So there will be some very interesting ways that you can repurpose some of the basic tools. Maybe if the majority of people are just looking for a simple boost, if you're interested in that adventure, you can actually, choose a different sound, do a bit of homework, and you'll be able to leverage these things in some very cool ways.
Amazing. Thank you. What would be a reason why folks wouldn't see deep sleep on their Muse results? Is there anything you can speak to about that?
Yeah, that's been coming up a lot, and I think that one thing that we've noticed is that the thresholds that are used for clinical analysis are quite severe. And also, people are mostly familiar of getting sleep results from, let's say, their wrist wearable or their ring, and those don't actually measure your brain activity. So, we've been really faithful to what the clinical standards are for how things are measured, which Maurice has pointed out actually has quite a long history, and maybe we're going to see some change soon. That's what we see happening. Anyway, if the one issue is if you don't meet the threshold, and this can happen because you just got a bit older and you're, just a couple microvolts below, suddenly it looks like you're getting no deep sleep. So this can happen. It also can happen that, the Muse isn't measuring as well as it could. And that you might want to like clean it and make sure that your skin is also clean and you moisturize your sensors. I mean, there's things you can do to improve the quality because that can also happen. And also Muse can make mistakes. So there's all these reasons, but the main reason we see is that there's quite a strict threshold with clinical sleep staging that may not really be appropriate. And so that's one of the reasons why we're going to start moving to more of a sleep depth measurement, because you'll be able to see that you're getting slow waves, and you can actually see how they're changing and improving. Whereas if you have this very strict threshold, I mean, if you don't see anything, how do you know that there's something happening? And that's quite frustrating. What I can say though is if you are using Deep Sleep Boost, you can also see that the moments you're getting deep sleep boost can lie outside of realms where it's being actually, staged as deep sleep. And this is because you are getting slow waves at different times. So that can be also be another thing you can look at if you're using this and you're not seeing deep sleep in your results.
Fantastic. That's so helpful. Just a couple practical notes. If you have the Muse S Athena and you don't see some of these features, please do update your app to 51.0. That's the current app that we're working with, and that can solve a lot of the visual issues there. I think that probably wraps it up for today. I know I can't thank David, Maurice, Chris enough for sharing all of your insights. I will say for those, I do see quite a span of both folks that have been longtime Muse users for anything from stress to meditation. Welcome back. There are some clinical researchers. Please do reach out to research partners at choosemuse.com for anything that you need in terms of learning about our research tools. I'll also drop my email in the chat if any clinical businesses who are incorporating Muse into any therapeutic interventions or assessments, you can get in touch with me to learn more about our tools there. But just a big thank you. This is such a huge event. I know that, Muse in general has worked so hard to really be the leader in accurate EEG, in comfortable EEG, in the next level of sleep solutions. And well done, everyone. So thank you for your time. And we'll send out the recording after the webinar is complete. And I hope you all have a great day. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Do well.
Thank you.
Thank you.